Understanding and managing cognitive distortions during uncertainty. Hi, I'm DrTonyWeston on the beautiful island of Santorini. Today we're going to talk about a very common experience we all face during uncertain times, cognitive distortions. When we're waiting for news that could impact our lives, like medical test results, it's easy for our minds to jump to worst case scenarios, amplifying our anxiety. And the good news is these thought patterns are something we can manage. So let's dive into understanding what cognitive distortions are and how we can deal with them in moments of uncertainty. So firstly, what are cognitive distortions? Cognitive distortions are automatic, biased ways of thinking that often distort reality. They happen when our brains fill in the blanks with negative, exaggerated or irrational thoughts, especially when we don't have all the information. During times of uncertainty, like waiting for medical results, our minds are more prone to these distorted ways of thinking because we naturally want to make sense of the unknown. Imagine you're waiting for the results of a biopsy and the doctor tells you that it could take a week to hear back. In that time, your mind might start to catastrophize, thinking, what if it's the worst case scenario? You may find yourself going down a rabbit hole of thoughts like, if the results are bad, my life is over. This is a classic example of a cognitive distortion. So let's look at some cognitive distortions that are common during uncertainty. Let's break down some of the most common cognitive distortions that tend to arise during uncertain times. Recognizing them is the first step toward managing them. So firstly, catastrophizing. This is when we expect the worst case scenario to happen, even when we don't have evidence. For example, thinking the test results will definitely show something terrible. Second, black and white thinking, also known as all or nothing thinking. This distortion occurs when we view situations in extremes, either good or bad, with no middle ground. For example, if the test results aren't perfect, my health is ruined. Third one, overgeneralization. Overgeneralization happens when we take one negative outcome and assume it applies to everything. For instance, the last test I had was bad, so this one will be too. 4. Fortune telling. Here we act as if we know exactly what will happen, even though we don't. It's like saying, I know these test results will bring bad news, without any real proof. 5. Emotional reasoning. This distortion happens when we believe that because we feel a certain way, it must be true. For example, I feel anxious, so something bad must be coming. In reality, our feelings don't always reflect the truth. Let's look at why cognitive distortions occur. So why do these distortions happen? Our brain is wired for survival, and uncertainty feels threatening. Our minds naturally seek answers and control, but when we lack clear information, our brain can fill these gaps with negative assumptions. This is an evolutionary response. Our ancestors had to be on alert for potential threats. Unfortunately, that same system can work against us in today's world, especially during times of medical uncertainty. So let's look at recognizing our own cognitive distortions. The first step in managing cognitive distortions is simply recognizing when they're happening. So I recommend keeping a thought journal during times of uncertainty, and here's a quick exercise you can try. 1. Write down the situation that's causing stress. 2. Write down the thoughts you're having in response to the situation. 3. Identify if any cognitive distortions are present, catastrophizing, black and white thinking, and so on. 4. Challenge these thoughts. Is there evidence for them? Are they helpful? By bringing awareness to our thinking patterns, we can create some distance between ourselves and the distorted thought. Remember, just because a thought pops into our mind doesn't make it true. Here are some strategies to manage cognitive distortions. So let's talk about how to manage these distortions when they arise. Firstly, challenge the thought. Ask yourself, Is there evidence to support this thought? Am I jumping to conclusions? Often, when we step back, we can see that our distorted thoughts are not based on facts. 2. Look for alternative explanations. Instead of assuming the worst, try to come up with other possible explanations. For example, if you're thinking, I know the results will be bad, ask yourself, is there any other possible outcome? You don't have all the information yet. 3. Practice mindfulness. Mindfulness helps us stay present and observe our thoughts without getting swept away by them. Try focusing on your breath or engaging in a grounding exercise to help you detach from the cognitive distortion. 4. Reframe the thought. Take the negative thought and reframe it into a more balanced way. For example, if you're thinking, this is going to be terrible, try reframing it as, I don't know the results yet, but I can handle whatever comes. This simple shift can help reduce our anxiety. 5. Self-compassion. Be kind to yourself when you notice these distortions. It's natural to have these thoughts during uncertainty, and you don't have to judge yourself for them. Acknowledge that your mind is trying to protect you and gently guide it back to a balanced perspective. Cognitive distortions and trauma responses. For those of us who have experienced trauma, cognitive distortions can feel even more intense. Trauma often amplifies our fear of the unknown because our brain is hypervigilant to perceive threats. In these cases, we may notice a higher tendency to catastrophize or engage in black and white thinking. If trauma responses are overwhelming, consider seeking trauma-informed therapy to help navigate these thoughts in a safe, supportive environment. So, in conclusion, here are some final tips. Living in uncertainty is challenging, and cognitive distortions can make it even harder. By recognizing these patterns and using techniques to manage them, we can reduce their impact on our emotional well-being. Remember, you have the ability to observe your thoughts without being consumed by them. It's not about getting rid of worry altogether. It's about finding balance and peace in the midst of uncertainty. Thank you for joining me today. As you continue navigating uncertain times, be gentle with yourself and remember, you are not your thoughts. See you next time.